Change is often not a choice, but a necessity. Circumstances force us to adapt, to swim rather than drown. But when circumstances push us in such a direction, how far can we really swim? To develop an education system that truly caters to the needs of our learners and our teachers, not just for today, but for the decades to come, the Ministry of Education embarked on a national consultation on transforming education in Guyana. It was noted that in order to reinvent ourselves as a sector, the Ministry of Education in Guyana needs to take stock of our efforts in education, considering the progress made in the achievement of the SDGs, which the COVID pandemic compounded. Added to that, it must be emphasized that for transformation to occur as a sector, we have to explore and implement far-reaching, pragmatic, bold, and evidence-based actions that require consideration of the future trends in education. Let's have a conversation on some of the trends we are examining over the ministry that pose a challenge in the long term. There is the prolonged effects of school disruptions, changing curricular and pedagogical needs, growing demand for technological competencies, expanding demand for education throughout life, and rising temperatures, ecological degradation, and infrastructure strain. Asking the question, if we are to truly transform the way education is delivered in Guyana, what must stop? What should we continue? And with careful thought, what must we reimagine? The focus was placed on 5 critical areas that must be considered when developing our education system. The conversation surrounded these tenets, and for clarity, illuminating on them is an intrinsic part of the consultation. There must be a conversation on inclusive, equitable, safe, and healthy schools, learning and skills for life, work and sustainable development, also teachers, teaching, and the teaching profession, not to mention the digital learning and transformation, as well as the financing of education. In addressing stakeholders present at the various consultations, the Minister of Education, Priya Manichand, delineated that true transformation is not possible without the active participation of all involved. Transformation, in its true sense, she noted, should reflect our vision for the future, the children.
Prior to COVID, the time was right, before COVID, for us to reimagine education, for us to think about whether we were doing it right, whether it was meeting the needs of this generation and this generation who will grow into adulthood. And I think the consensus was there around the world that we weren't meeting needs and that we had become too ensconced in doing things traditionally in the same way. And then came COVID. And if we were ever unsure about whether our systems were resilient and whether we could deliver education in varied ways, we learned as a world that nobody was ready.
During the consultation, it was clearly expressed that some of the aforementioned future trends are already occurring and posing challenges in some areas. Stakeholders added that depending on the geographical location, these trends and their effects may vary.
Transformation is very, very important. If we are looking at transformation, it will look different in Georgia as against Region 10 and by extension, Sub-Region 1 or Sub-Region 2, riverine areas. For Sub-Region 2, transformation might simply mean we need more textbooks. For us in Linden, transformation might mean something else.
Our schools. This is premised on the need for inclusive, equitable, safe, and healthy schools. It is the general consensus that there is a need to enhance the current structures that exist to more adaptable, modern edifices, thus encouraging conducive learning and teaching.
We need to stop certain building designs that contribute to heat in school building. For example, buildings are just built with no direction for the wind to enter.
We need to redesign schools structures because the present structure does not facilitate comfort. In this sense, if you feel yourself at the moment, those at this end by the door are a little more relief than those at the end down there. Because those at the end are getting the heat, and those at the end here are getting a little bit more ventilation. In that sense, if we are to build a building in this direction, the ones at that end are getting the better heat, and those of this side are getting a better ventilation. So the direction of how structures are built should be considered in order to get full ventilation of the natural air that we have. If we don't have that, we are saying build structures that facilitate air conditions. Presently, the windows that we have, most windows that school have, is the sash windows. That there cannot facilitate ventilation. Those sash windows should be removed and should have better windows that facilitate good ventilations.
The view is equally supported by the ministry. It is the view of the ministry, actually, that in order to build a first-class education system, a more modern approach is needed. As such, the necessary infrastructure to enable such a transition must be put in place. Here, we see a need to reinvent.
These new partnerships are important because it holds us accountable for the quality of education, and it introduces a supporting mechanism at the level of the school community. When the community supports the teaching and learning process, children learn and schools flourish. We are then collectively providing safe and equitable environment for our children. The community involvement is so important if we are to truly realize safe, equitable environments for our children. This presents a new challenge for us, and as such, we need to be proactive. Our risk management policy presents the roadmap that enables us to be prepared and responsive to these challenges.
Lifelong education. The world has been undergoing constant transformation in every sector, and this is largely owed to the technological advancements of the day. As such, there's a need for learning and skills for life, work, and sustainable development continually. New frontiers are being explored every day, and education plays a critical role in preparing persons to take advantage of presented opportunities. The stakeholders held varying positions on how to approach this particular tenet.
So if we want to speak about the future of education and transformativeness and transformation, what do we want the education to do and be for our students in the future, or for people in the future? And I think it's going to be about this. It's going to be about creating a citizen, not a student. When we speak about education now, we speak about student success, as if the student is the output and not the citizen is the output. The student is the raw material, the process by which you get to the citizen. And so if we have to think about transformative education, we have to think about what kinds of citizens we want, not what kinds of students we want. What will this country need and this planet need in the next 2-3 decades? Because what we are hearing from our students now, and I'm now speaking about the university level students, and we have data to support this, is they want to be able to decide a curriculum to mix and match something that they believe is a career that they want to have. So these structures that we have now, this rigidity in the education systems of the world, which presume that everybody can learn at the same pace, the same thing, in the same way, in the same structure, I think that has to go. And I believe all around the world, the data is going to support that. So that's what our students are telling us. When we were going to school, the teacher was the powerhouse. We were the empty vessel. They were the fonts of knowledge. They pour into us, and we had to regurgitate back what they want to tell us. Now that doesn't work. So the role of the teacher now has to be the role of a navigator, because knowledge or information, not knowledge, information is at everybody's fingertips, most people's fingertips. And so what we have to be able to do is to help students to be able to meld that information together, or to choose the information that they need in a responsible way to apply.
Education, learning, and vocational training must therefore be seen from a holistic and lifelong learning perspective that emphasizes ecological, social, and emotional, intercultural, interdisciplinary, and intergenerational learning to foster global citizenship, the rule of law, mutual trust, and global solidarity. It requires strengthening of a wide range of cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral skills needed in a fast-changing and still largely unequal world, such as self-assessment, critical inquiry, interpersonal communication, conflict management, creativity, collaborative work, empathy, and emotional intelligence.
That play a critical role in the whole education delivery process. I know we have children who function at various levels. I think it is Bill Hendricks in his book, A Person Called You, made mention of every child. And I know, Mr. Chindu, you like this. Every child is born gifted. But what do we do for them to discover, to understand who they are and how they could function, even if they have special education needs? And so the focus must be on those things. The education that we impart must embrace koinonia and self-discovery, not just transmission of information, but empowering people and releasing them and giving them an opportunity to function. Because if you fight against people with giftedness and so on, at the end of the day, everyone loses. Believe me, nobody wins at the end of the day. So it is important to work together, for us to work together as a team, because we cannot have transformation if we are working in abeyance. People must work together, and I'm happy that we have all our stakeholders here, critical stakeholders. When it comes to grace, geography matters, because even the child or the children in the hinterland, wherever people exist, it's a right for them to be educated. It's a right for them to fulfill potential and realize their dreams. And so the concept of synergy cannot be overlooked if we're going to really make the progress that we want to make.
Teachers, teaching, and the teaching profession. Transforming any sector requires due consideration of its key players. It therefore leaves to reason that no transformation can truly be had without candid conversations on how to revolutionize teaching. The pandemic created the need to close the classrooms and take instructive teaching to online platforms, something that no government or institution were prepared for. This new paradigm, of course, exposed fissures that we must be prepared to openly confront and address.
Then, of course, there's new pressures. Pressures on teachers will likely continue to increase, including pressures to address the widening learning gaps that we are seeing. So teachers have to become the solution. Technological adaptation. You don't know how to use Google Classroom? You haven't done your Pro Futuro? You have to learn how to teach with technology. You've tried hybrid, you've tried blended, you've tried online alone. That becomes the teacher's cross. Now, of course, I have to say in full disclosure that upskilling is necessary for us to adapt and survive and thrive. But it is also a pressure for teachers to have to adapt quicker and adjust faster than everybody else.
The move to enhance the teaching profession was greatly supported and was seen as a direct catalyst to any educational transformation. The policy position in Guyana currently is to have 100% trained teachers at all levels by 2025. This means as a sector, we must be able to recruit and train teachers to ensure they're able to meet our learners' needs. Both initial teacher training and continuous professional development have scaled up teaching that includes a mix of in-person, in-school, in-center, and distance online provision. Access to professional development opportunities and salary scales established through social dialogue can be linked to progressing teacher careers. Teachers shall be perceived as actors of change and must be part of the decision-making process concerning education to protect their educational autonomy and ensure enabling working conditions. A culture of collaboration between teaching professionals, their representative organizations, governing bodies, and other social actors needs to be established to ensure extensive support for teachers. As a sector, we are in the process of conceptualizing a leadership program for current and aspiring leaders to become culturally responsive and instructional leaders in schools. Digital learning and transformation. In examining the approaches taken thus far to offset the learning loss brought on by the pandemic, one has to take into full context the effectiveness of online learning as well. The effectiveness of online learning remains the subject of much debate. Experts have been studying the retention of information by students and how remote learning has impacted the development and social skills of children. The inferences determine that the efficacy of online learning is dependent on mainly three conditions: students having consistent access to the internet and devices, teachers receiving the needed training to administer courses using online platforms, and platforms that provide personalized learning catering to individual needs of the students. There is also the deduction that the quality of education hinges on the accessible infrastructure of a country. Given the state of infrastructure in Guyana, internet connectivity was and still remains inconsistent and quite expensive for less fortunate students to gain access to. In addition, many children from less fortunate backgrounds do not have access to devices, preventing them from taking part in courses. Remote education, as is the case in Guyana's hinterland, has shown the need for much more support and self-improvement courses for children to develop scholastically. It can be observed that students learn, retain, and apply information most effectively when they have received personalized educational instruction and when sufficient resources are made available to them. However, there remains an echoing cry to retain a hybrid approach.
Canceling out some of the hard copy work that we do for teachers, like the records that we have to do hard copy. over the pandemic, some of us were forced to do it soft copy. So why just not stick to that now? Why go back to the paperwork? Why go back to doing hard copy lesson plans, which is very difficult, especially when you have one of the same class, you have to do the one lesson plan several times for that the class is in that level. So why not just stay online, or why just not stay soft copy?
That we should not completely eradicate online learning out of the school system, but integrate it into our current system, which is a physical learning. Yes, we acknowledge the disadvantage, but there were some advantages as well. And I believe we should incorporate the advantages into the physical learning. Instead of students coming and writing subjects which can possibilities is take up time, utilize the online platforms. You have Google Classroom. Let us improve those. Let us have more online platforms. Teachers can use the opportunity to send the notes beforehand, so that in classroom they can have open discussions, have students speaking more. This not only improves note-taking, analyzing, and remembering and all of that, but it strongly helps with tertiary level. Stop going back in the past. We need to move on. We need to have more generations. Generations need to have discussions. Stop having the older generation making decisions and have the new generations a part of it. That's what I strongly believe that should happen.
But my son, who was at the time about 11 or 12, went into a tirade one day about homework, and I wasn't listening to him at first. And he started off by saying, "Y'all don't know how to teach children." And then I tuned out. And about 5 minutes later, he was still carrying on, and I thought, let me listen to him. And I'm really sorry that I did not tape that tirade, because he was pointing out every single thing that we would discover later on when COVID hit, about why students technically had to learn certain things when they could navigate online and get the information. Why is it that they had to sit in class and do this, that, and the other when they wanted to apply these things? Why is it the teacher thought that they could teach them from a book that was 6 or 8 years old, and when they Googled the information, the most up-to-date information was there, but then the teacher would say to them, guess what? You have to do what I say, when they knew that this was. So all of these things. One of the things that I believe we have to consider is what is going to be the function of public education in the future.
Education financing. In order to effectively initiate, implement, and sustain any changes that will lead to a transformation of education in Guyana, the requisite financing must be capitalized. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, some estimated an annual funding shortfall of $148 billion in low and middle income countries. The gap between the resources currently being made available and what would be necessary to achieve the education systems called for in the 2030 agenda. Around the world, at all income levels, there are still many countries that fall short of the commitments made at the 2015 World Education Forum in Incheon of allocating at least 4 to 6% of GDP and or at least 15 to 20% of total public expenditure to the education sector. Guyana remains an exception, with government's allotment to the education sector representing a 22.6% increase from 2021 and accounting for 13.5% of the overall $552.9 billion 2022 budget. The government of Guyana allocated $74.4 billion for the education sector in the 2022 budget. And among the initiatives it will cover is the increase in school grants for children, laptops for teachers, the expansion of the National School Feeding Program, the expansion of the Guyana Learning Channel, and EduFM radio station, and the cost of 4,500 gold scholarships.
See this a lot with the Caribbean Development Bank, the CDB, the World Bank, and the IDB, where they're supporting and facilitating our collaborations with our closest neighbors. Because we are each other's solution, really. So think about trade, think about intellectual exchanges, even at the education level, with Barbados, Brazil, Suriname, and other territories, all of which helps to open doors that lead to investment in education. These new partnerships are important because it holds us accountable for the quality of education. And it induces a supporting mechanism at the level of the school community. When the community support for the teaching learning process and children learn and the school flourishes, we are then collectively provided for and safe and have a safe and equitable environment for all of our students. So when your next head teacher comes to you and says, we're trying to build a community garden, you could give us a couple of seeds? Say yes. We want our children to learn about community helpers. Can we come into your station? Say yes. We're having a talk on the environment. Can one of your garbage collectors come and talk to us? Say yes. Because education is everybody's business.
The question still remains: are we to continue with an education system that serves an era long gone? And in transforming education as is, what do we keep? What do we reinvent? And what must we definitely stop?
What is our role in this new world? It cannot be to teach in front of a blackboard and write it there and you copy it and you go home and regurgitate it. That whole how to navigate, what information to believe in this age of misinformation and how much trouble that could cause. And so we don't know the answer fully, but it would be something we are willing to examine even here. And if the only thing we did here was to come out of this meeting with some fairer idea of what the ideal Guyanese citizen should look like, having gone through this pipeline of education, then I think today would have been a massive success.
Are we to develop a generation of future independent thinkers, ready and prepared to face the challenges of the future? Or shall we reprise ourselves to the comfort of, it has always worked, why change it now? Although the discussions are not new and have been ongoing way before COVID-19, it must be accentuated that it cannot be business as usual post-pandemic. The response to the pandemic was reactionary, and the world now looks to respond in an informed and proactive manner. The same has to apply to education. Or should we wait until future challenges to our systems arise before we seek to navigate such challenges by planning and implementing strategies to effectively modernize and fortify our educational systems and institutions? Tangible evidence has been presented that there are several factors to be considered as the need to transform the education sector becomes ever more necessary. Guyana has taken the bold step to confront these questions so as to produce results that lead to the creation of a premier education system. The national consultation saw participation from numerous stakeholders in the education sector: parents, students, educators, members of civil society, PTA bodies, the Press Association, regional democratic councils, and Guyana's growing migrant population from all 10 administrative regions and Education District 11, Georgetown, among others, were all present. A multitude of ideas, challenges, and yes, solutions came to the fore. as the various teams visited the regions holding these difficult conversations. The overarching response was the existing need for transformation, a transformation that maximizes our greatest resource, our children.